Well, good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the third debriefing session of the last berec plenary meeting. We have been facing some challenges this year. You may remember well the net neutrality guidelines. Now comes the review of the telecoms framework, which will be one of the main topics of our next year program. And in this regard, let me briefly outline of that session. So, as you can see, we organized a workshop on e-accessibility for disabled users. It took place one day preceding the plenary meeting, and we have published a press release on this event where you can find all the details. The main part of the debriefing is, of course, about the outcome of the plenary itself. We will provide you with an overview on the reports adopted here. One of the main points of the agenda is the draft berec work program for next year. We will give you a short outline about what berec will address next year. As I just briefly mentioned, the review of the telecoms framework is at the heart of our schedule for next year and an ongoing work stream, that's for sure. The timing of our NGN expert working group for this year was therefore absolutely perfect, as they investigated issues that are very relevant to feed into the discussion about the telecoms review. You will see in a minute that the NGN experts have compiled several reports, and at the end of this session you will find an overview of the published documents, and as usual we will announce this schedule for the upcoming meetings and events. As I have just mentioned before, we discussed the berec work program for next year at the last plenary meeting. The work program is naturally set along the berec strategy, which is to promote competition and investment, to promote the internal market, to empower and protect end users, as well as to ensure quality and operational efficiency. With this in mind, the objective of our work program is to address the current regulatory challenges and to prepare for the new challenges that are ahead of us. Those challenges come from the market development, the technological changes, and the social developments. In light of the review of the telecoms framework, and particularly as the draft text was published by the Euro Commission on the 14th of September, our clear focus for next year will be on the framework review, where berec will provide its expert opinion. The incoming chair, Sebastian Soriano from ARCEP, will set out more details about our work program at the stakeholder forum on the 17th of October. You will ask yourselves, what are the next steps now? The Board of Regulators approved the draft work program for public consultation, and the public consultation will run until the 2nd of November. And as I just said, we invite stakeholders participating in the stakeholder forum next week to discuss the work program with us. The final version will be adopted in the last plenary meeting in early December in Berlin. And after that, the work program will be published. Now let me hand over to Kara, who will give us an overview about the work of the NGN experts and the reports produced. Please, Kara, you have the floor.
Thanks, Wilhelm, and good morning also from my side. The NGN work group published 3 reports, and no, it was 2 reports and 1 common position. Let me start with the document that is perhaps most closely related to the discussions of the upcoming review, the BEREC report on challenges and drivers for NGN rollout and infrastructure competition. It gives an overview of where member states stand in terms of NGA rollout, and it's based on member states' case studies. It's motivated by the variation in rollout across member states, and it investigates the main drivers of rollout infrastructure competition, namely the availability of DOCSIS coverage, high cable coverage, and also the availability of alternative FTTP operators. Secondly, demand-side factors such as take-up, willingness to pay, and also whether upfront payments are paid to fund rollout. And thirdly, of course, supply-side factors that impact rollout cost. And here there are factors that are very important, for instance, the availability of ducts until the premises that largely determine which strategy of rollout and also regulation is chosen. We have illustrated a regulatory practice using 4 scenarios of SMP regulation and clustered different forms of access regulation adopted in different member states by looking at these scenarios. We think that we show that the type and extent of NGA rollout can to a large extent be explained by these factors which are exogenous to NRAs and regulation. For instance, the availability of ducts and the quality of the existing copper network, and also whether there is pressure to react quickly to the to cable DOCSIS networks. We held a consultation of this report. In fact, BEREC's view that infrastructure competition presents a main driver is widely shared, and also parties generally agree with analysis of supply-side factors. Of course, there are differences in views, or that there were some people who wanted us to give more policy-oriented conclusions or recommendations in this report. However, the report was intended to be fact-driven and to be usable as an input now for the discussion of the review. We didn't want to preempt that discussion. We've taken up a number of suggestions from stakeholders in the consultation and also in some of the country case studies. We only got 7 submissions. It's probably everybody was completely sort of net neutrality dominated everything. And in that sense, we, if you want to know more details, we did mention co-investment and risk-sharing agreements reached on a commercial basis in scenario 1. We've also emphasized the role of independent FTTP deployment and bundled offers, and the role of the DSM strategy, and some minor changes in the case studies of a number of countries. Secondly, we published a common position on Layer 2 wholesale access products. This work was preceded by a report the year before, and now we went on to define and agree on a number of common positions with regard to the conditions for the imposition of Layer 2 wholesale access products, the prices, and a whole range of technical characteristics, namely technology, the CPE modem, bandwidth, quality of service, traffic prioritization, multicast, number of VLANs, customer identification, security and fault management. The consultation, again, the report gives an overview of the received contributions. We had we don't really change our common positions. Most of the comments address very different issues, and of course there are requirements to change them in opposite directions depending on who was the submitting party. There are 3 minor changes in the common position, however no big changes. And then we have published a third report, namely we have done, perhaps to recall, we did case studies on the migration from POTS networks to IP in the core network in the previous year. And now we looked at migration of the subscriber access line in Europe. It focuses on the migration of traditional POTS ISDN subscriber access lines to IP. It gives an overview on the status of the migration in Europe and country case studies. In fact, the impact of the migration was limited in most of the countries considered. Consumer issues are more likely to arise in cases where the migration was network-driven rather than customer-driven. And we see that wholesale services like wholesale line rental have been replaced by other wholesale products like bitstream access. And with this, I hand back to Wilhelm.
Thank you very much, Kara. Finally, now here is the list with the Board of Regulators documents that were approved for publication. And the draft BEREC program for next year is going through a public consultation, as I've previously said. And even you see that on the next slide, you see the documents published. And the next one is the list of the documents of the Management Committee decision that were approved for publication as well. These are 2 slides. And finally, these are the next BEREC events for the remaining year. You know, we are now at the end of my chairmanship. As I've previously mentioned, next week we will have the stakeholder forum in Brussels. And the last contact network meeting for this year is scheduled for mid-November in Riga. And lastly, the Board of Regulators will convene for its last meeting this year in early December in Berlin. Having said that, I want to thank you very much for your attention. Are there questions from your side? Please, go ahead.
Yes, good morning. I'm Friedrich de Back from Telefonica. I just wonder if, what's in your opinion, perhaps the highlights of the latest international roaming benchmark report on trends? I don't know.
That is, you mean that report that has been even mentioned in the MLEX?
Indeed.
Right. I think we can see, we can echo that. We realize that there is a decreasing on price caps. And that is a signal that competition works. So that could be the conclusion. With regulation and competition both together, there is a special relationship. But quite that, I think we can see that that works. We hope that works at the end of the day.
Hi, Tony Shorthold from Tellage. I had a couple of questions. The first is again on roaming. Is BEREC intending to give an opinion on the fair use policy? That's the first. And the second then is more prosaic. It's on the NGN drivers and so on. Sorry, I haven't seen the report, obviously, but you know, are there any significant changes, or is it, you know, what are the significant changes from the draft published?
Okay, if you allow, I will answer the question regarding roaming, and then I will give up on NGN to Kara. Regarding roaming, there will be an input of berec for the proposal that will be published at the end of this week. And we will hand that over to the Commission, and that will be published then, but it's still work in progress. It's very detailed. We are of the opinion that we should analyze the pro and cons of the proposal of the Commission, and because it's work in progress, I ask your understanding that I will not be more precise on that, okay? And then on regard of the NGN issue, I will hand over to Kara.
Well, as I just mentioned, one of the criticisms from different sides, both alternative operators and incumbents, was asking for recommendations, and we didn't go into this because the set out of the report was rather to provide a fact-based analysis that can feed into the discussions of the review without interfering with berec's also ongoing work on the reviews. In that sense, I just mentioned a couple of small changes. We took up a suggestion of Telefonica to mention co-investment and risk sharing and the role of independent FTTP deployment. And there have been some minor changes in the country case studies of Croatia, France, Germany, the Netherlands, and Poland. But in fact, we haven't changed anything fundamental.
Please.
Yes. My name is Anne Väinö. I'm from Finland. Well, I would like to ask something about the roaming issue. In Finland, we have those, you know, unlimited data packages, and this Commission proposal is quite problematic for us, and I would like to know how this issue will be solved in berec's opinion.
Yeah, Becky, sorry. As I've mentioned before, that is still work in progress. I asked you, yeah, it's just for 2 days, and then we will put something on the table. But I ask your understanding to wait until 2 days. Is that acceptable? Okay, thank you. Please, you have the floor.
Yeah, just to confirm. So on Friday it will be published. So you will submit it to the Commission, and it will be published on the website at the same time. Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yes.
Just on the third paper, broadband paper, the transition products, did you find that there was a full suite of products available, or were there gaps? You know, so was BSA sufficient, say, even to cover lawful interception, or you know, I don't know, but I could see potential gaps. Did you find there was a full suite had emerged, or that there were gaps in some of the products?
Well, of course, with regard to wholesale products, we know how difficult it is to have a transition from one product to the other product. However, we feel that the alternative products mainly can do the jobs, and we haven't identified any major gap. No.
if there are any questions, I thank you once again for attending this this meeting, this press conference, and we'll see each other then mid of December in Brussels again. Thank you for coming and see you there. Bye.